Hey, thank you all for coming along. My name's Tony Albrecht, and I'm going to be talking at you for the next 45 minutes or so about our brains and kind of how they work. As always with doing any presentation, you learn a lot about the thing that you're presenting to make sure that you know what you're talking about, or at least think that you do. So this has been fascinating for me to dive into this. It's not the talk I thought I was going to be giving. I thought I'd do something really hardcore and techie, but this is one that was chosen, so I had to do it. So this is about human biases in programming. My name's Tony Albrecht. I'm a principal engineer at Riot Games. I've been there for nearly 10 years now, working primarily on League and TFT. And this has nothing to do with that. So, a lot of this is based on the contents of a book, Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman. He's a Nobel Prize winner for, in economics. He put forward a theory called prospect theory, which focuses on how humans make decisions when facing risk, particularly financial risk. This book is really well worth reading. It really highlights the way that our brains function, like the programming in there to a certain extent. And understanding this is I think, useful. Like if you understood the hardware of your computer so you can program it better, understanding your own wetware can help you use it a bit better as well. So fundamentally what he states is that we are all susceptible to biases and intuitions that are unreasonable, instinctive, and often fundamentally wrong. That's the book if you want to grab it. Now, I'm going to ask you some... I need to make this big. There we go. Ask some simple questions. All right? These are not, well, you could consider them to be trick questions, but what I want you to do is to listen to what your brain tells you. What is your instinctive response to these questions? And then listen to your brain again tell you whether or not these instinctive responses are actually correct or not. So it's paying attention to how you think about this problem. So, for example, a bat and a ball cost $1.10. The bat costs $1 more than the ball. How much does the ball cost? It feels like $1.10, but it's not. It's $1.05. And the more you do these, the more the instinctive response is correct. But I asked my mum this one, and she was utterly wrong, and wouldn't believe me when I even showed her the maths that it's how it worked. Because that's how strong your intuitive responses can be. For example, another one. It takes 5 machines 5 minutes to make 5 widgets. How long would it take 100 machines to make 100 widgets? It's 5 minutes. Because each machine makes 1 widget. But you feel like it should be 100 minutes. A patch of lily pads doubles in size every day. If it takes 20 days for lily pads to cover half the lake, how long will it take to cover the entire lake? 21 days in total, because it's doubling in size. Humans are really bad at exponential growth. They're bad at percentages. They're bad at anything that's not linear progression. We're bad at big numbers, all sorts of issues. But the more you do this stuff, the better you get at it. So our brains are trained to work in certain ways. And if you're aware of it, you can break it. But fundamentally we act in certain ways. And it's pretty common in the way we're taught. It's to do with our inherent biases. And that's kind of what this talk is all about. So Kahneman divides up the mind into 2 systems. He calls it System 1. And this is this fast, automatic, intuitive response. And it's designed to save us from saber-toothed tigers and stuff. So that we can react as soon as we hear a noise. We can react as soon as we see a glimpse of something charging at us. We don't have to think about, oh, that's a saber-toothed tiger. They're quite dangerous. I should run. So this is designed to shortcut all of this cognitive processing and just give us a quick, sharp answer on what to do. System 2 is slow, it's deliberate, it's analytical. It is the thing that, it's kind of like the eye. It's the voice in your head that can actually apply logic to scenarios. So System 1 is prone to cognitive biases and errors. It's a shortcut, it's a hack. It works fast, but it's not always right. But it feels right. System 2 is accurate but lazy. You don't want to use it if you don't think you have to. So System 1 operates automatically and quickly with little or no effort and no sense of voluntary control. I just realised I had a spelling mistake there. So, for example, detect that one object's more distant than another. You don't have to think about it. You can see things are further. It's obvious. Driving a car on a familiar route. This is a complex process that we've done often enough that you don't really think about it. If you're driving home from work, you don't think about what you do, you just do it. Answering simple maths questions if maths is easy for you. Reacting to loud noises, reading words. If reading is easy for you, big words, you can't help but read them. They just appear in your head. Detecting hostility, emotions, all those types of things. You don't really think about them, you just do with them, they happen. This is System 1. System 2 allocates attention to the effortful mental activities that demand it, including complex computations. The operations of System 2 are often associated with the subjective experience of agency, choice, and concentration. This is you thinking about stuff hard. This is the little voice in the cogs clanking away in the brain. So, for example, look for a woman with purple hair. You actually have to look around, unless you know Anna, and think, okay, a woman with purple hair. It's not an instinctive thing. Counting the occurrences of the letter A in a page of text. You can't just look at it and say that's 27. Well, you can, it's 27. Or compare two computers for overall value. You need to think about this stuff. There's lots of pros and cons and things you have to weigh up in order to make a choice. Or checking the validity of a complex logical argument. You've got to sit, think, and talk it through in your head and figure it all out. So, System 1 and System 2. Now, to be clear, this is not literally half and half of the brain. It's not literally a part of the brain that is System 1 and a part of the brain that is System 2. There is some really interesting research into the whole split brain thing, but it's not really what Kahneman's talking about. So, Systems 1 and 2 are both active whenever we're awake. System 1 feeds impressions, intuition, and intentions to System 2. Usually, System 2 accepts the feed from System 1 and doesn't question it. It's like, yep, no worries. System 2 is activated whenever System 1 detects something unusual, something that violates the model of the world that System 1 maintains, or something that System 1 can't answer, like 17 times 24. Unless that's what you do a lot, you've got to think about it. So another thing is, System 1 can't be turned off. Like, you see a word in a language you know, you'll read it. A song that you know really well, your brain sings along with it as well. So System 1 can be confidently wrong. System 2 is a grown-up in the room. He says, nope, that can't be right because... And System 1 is pervasive and persistent though. Even though you know it's wrong, it still feels right. For example, the Mola-Laya illusion. Those lines look like different lengths, but they're exactly the same length, but they still look like different lengths. Even though we know that they are the same, your System 1 is telling you, no, these are different. So System 1 is like an LLM. It provides answers and feelings without really understanding why. System 2 is the I, the voice that you can contemplate things and make the decisions that are important. The interactions of System 1 and 2 lead to biases, inaccuracies and irrational behaviours, which are common and normal in humans, and I think some mammals as well. So these are all the different biases. The book goes into great detail on all of these and more, with detailed examples. It's not like a subjective discussion about these things. He's done actual experiments and shown that these biases exist and what their impacts are and how common they are and all sorts of stuff. So again, fascinating read. So we're going to go through these and I'm going to talk about examples of those in the real world, examples in programming and mitigation strategies for avoiding the negative side effects of these biases. So the first one is the anchoring bias. It's a tendency to rely too heavily on the first piece of information, the anchor, when making decisions. So, for example, Charity donations. Somebody comes to your door, knocks and asks you to donate $50 a month to a cancer charity. And you think, it's a good charity, but $50 a month is a lot, it's going to add up. And you end up talking them down to a single donation of $20. If they come out and ask you for $20 straight up, you probably would have said no and tried to talk them down. All right? You're anchored by the first value that they've mentioned. This is like real estate. Auctions always start high. Salary negotiations, which is why you should start at a stupid high number that you don't expect to get and let them talk you down. Prosecutors propose high sentences to anchor the judge. Of course, the judge is aware of these biases and should be appropriately adjusting. And retail discounts. A jacket that's marked from $300 down to $100. You're going to save $200 by spending $100, even though it's worth $50. A program example is task estimation. So when we are doing, my team, we do estimations on how long a task is going to do. We're generally in a Google Meet, and we'll all type in the number, like a Fibonacci number that gives us the size of the task, the difficulty of the task. But the first one that pops up is the one that anchors the rest. So you see a 3 and you think, okay, it's a 3 or it's a 5 or it's a 1 or it's a 2. If someone comes in with a 13, then you kind of anchor yourself around that. So that first number influences the others if it's red. So another example is leading with a solution. Someone says, there's a problem and here's how we should fix it. That anchors how you will probably approach it and how you will think about it. Another one is performance metrics. I've made this thing twice as fast now. It used to be 100 milliseconds, now it's 50 milliseconds. It needs to be 5 milliseconds. So that's good, but it's just not good enough. So mitigation strategies. Blind, anonymous task estimates are encouraged before discussing them as a group. If you have a way of submitting the independent estimates, it helps avoid that anchoring bias as well as the halo effect, which we'll discuss later. We should be using objective data and historical information to inform our estimates rather than relying on initial suggestions. We should be discussing the symptoms of a problem rather than solutions. Like, what is this actually doing? Rather than, this is how I think we should fix this problem. Let's lock down what's actually happening first, then we can figure it out. The problem with teams providing other teams suggested solutions for problems is that they have very different contexts and understand the problem in very different ways and will provide different solutions, and that can lead to conflict. So we should try to be aware of anchors and actively avoid them, unless you want to influence the outcome. In which case, you can use anchors to get your way a little bit better. So all of these have a positive and negative effect. The availability heuristic. It's a tendency to judge the likelihood of events based on how easily examples come to mind. So this is the influence comes from how easily an event or an example is recalled from memory due to its recency, its vividness, or emotional impact. It's about probability estimation. So people overestimate the likelihood of something happening based on how quickly they can recall similar events. So for example, shark attacks. Australia has about 20 shark attacks a year. A handful of those result in death. But the fear around shark attacks is such that the probability of attack or death is exaggerated. I mean, compared to driving on our roads are far more dangerous. But it's not as scary as being eaten by something. So, and that availability is like emotionally tinged, I suppose. A local burglary happened in our street. And straight afterwards, everyone's going up buying cameras and all sorts of stuff. And it happens once every 10 years, tops. So we can very quickly recall these because of the emotional impact. It's not just fear-based as well. It can be a positive response, like gambling. You remember the horse that won and how you felt when it made this final run and crossed the line and you won. But overall, you lost for the day. It was awful. But you remember that one good thing and you keep coming back for it. Program examples, the frequency of bug types. We had an issue with TFT where we shipped with too much memory being used in part of the game, and it caused some ANRs, application not responding errors. And so we did some work and we pulled in a whole lot of metrics around the memory, and then for months afterward, when anything would go wrong, it's the memory. We need to fix the memory. Because that was the last bit of information that we had. It was easy to recall. That's what we used. And it was rarely ever memory being the cause in those situations. So solution fixation. You spend 2 weeks optimizing some code. Next task you start. How long do you spend planning to solve it in an optimal fashion? You keep optimizing things even though you don't necessarily need to. Design patterns can be a crutch as well. You use this pattern and you like this pattern, so you fit that pattern into other solutions. Not because it's the best solution, but because it's the one you know and it comes very quickly to mind. And cargo coding. This is, I'll cut and paste this code because that's what somebody else did and I trust their work. And so without really understanding it, and you get these duplications of code all over the place that aren't the best solution for what you have. So mitigation, collect data. A lot of these things about having an objective answers that you can look at. Analysis of data itself can be quite subjective, so you need to be careful that you're doing things correctly. You should be focusing on the bug and problem symptoms, not solutions. And discussing solutions with others. Bring in their alternative biases and compare them to what yours are and work together in order to figure this stuff out. So discussion with others is great. And also refactor and remove old bad code. You know, stuff you don't really need, that's particularly comments that are out of date. If the code is slow, broken, inefficient, whatever, get rid of it. So encourage diversity of opinion, different points of view, different experiences, different biases. Are we solving the correct problem the best way? Critical code reviews, make sure that you are actually reviewing the code well. Look at what's going on. Is this the best solution? Because that itself, the initial code, is an anchor, and it's what's in front of you. So it's a current. The solution they provided may not be the best one, is what I'm saying. So, and use data wherever you can. If you kept detailed data on every bet you'd ever made, would you still be gambling? I know my family would. Now, confirmation bias is the tendency to search for, interpret, and remember information in a way that confirms one's preconceptions. People tend to stick to their initial judgments, even when contradictory evidence is presented. We've all seen this. We've all got a crazy uncle who loves his conspiracy theories. Political bias is a hot one. This is what I believe because this is what I believe, and I'm going to find proof of what I believe by looking for the answer that I actually want. And it's everywhere. It's generally complex systems with unclear outcomes. They are easy to make up your own rules and your own ideas based on what system one is telling you instinctively. Programming examples, YOLO check-ins. It's one line change. I'll just check it in, it'll be fine. And it breaks things. You know it's going to work. You've tested it yourself. It's definitely going to work, but we have processes for a reason. We'll touch on more on that a bit later as well. Writing tests that pass. You've written the code to solve a particular problem, and you've tested it with the ways it can fail, but you haven't written the tests around the ways that you haven't tested for. So, which is a hard bias to work around. Having other people involved to find edge cases and whatnot is probably a thing worth doing. Non-deterministic performance tests or any other tests that don't have a clear outcome. If your performance test gives you a variation of 30% from run to run, how are you going to find 2% changes in performance without running it 100 times? You know? Yeah. So mitigation strategies have clear, accountable processes for code submissions. It should be, this is what you do, this is how you do it, and there should be guardrails to keep you on track. Automated testing with clear pass, fail output. It's obvious, but it is also, you can't have any space for subjective outputs for tests. And you want consistent, repeatable performance tests. Even though they aren't necessarily, a clear, yes, this is good, no, this is bad. Drawing a line somewhere and sticking to that is a good idea. So, confirmation bias, basically question everything. Validate with data and seek independent feedback on what you've done to ensure that you're actually you're not suffering from your own confirmation bias. Hindsight bias. This is the tendency to see events as having been predictable after they've already occurred. And again, we've all seen this. I knew that was going to happen. And it can lead to unjustified confidence in your ability by saying, I said that would happen, even if you didn't. But it's obvious in hindsight, and that happens a lot. In programming, I knew that was going to happen. I knew that would break that. I knew that we're going to have load issues. I knew but if you don't bring it up beforehand, you didn't know. So around this, when something does go wrong, you want to have blameless root cause analysis. So it's not about you fucked up. It is about things went wrong. What did we miss? How can we make sure that doesn't happen in the future? What are the things we need to do so that we can learn from this experience and make our systems better and more rigorous? It's an opportunity to grow rather than blame. We should be focusing on what can be done to avoid this in the future, and like I said, it's a learning opportunity. Everyone can see what happened afterwards. That doesn't help. Sometimes the answer is we couldn't have known that this was going to go wrong, and there may not be an easy way to do it, but just being aware of that problem in the future may make you, well, it will make you look at it again because you're going to have recency bias. So, and try and pull out what are the signs that you missed before this actually happened. Sunk cost fallacy is a big one. It's a tendency to endeavour once an investment in money, effort or time has been made, even when continuing is not the best option. It's the emotional attachment to past investments and not wanting that investment to be wasted. We tend to focus on what's already been spent, even though it's unrecoverable. You spent time doing something, you're never going to get that time back. So you want to make sure that that's not wasted by using that, even though maybe it's not worth it. So examples, you've invested 10K in NFTs and they're going to go up in value real soon now. Everyone loves cartoon monkeys, right? Oh, you spent 2 years learning Java and you hate it. So you just use it for everything now because I've learnt it. And most relationships, seemingly. Yes, my wife's going to be here this afternoon, so don't tell her I said that. So program examples like sticking with an engine you've built rather than porting to a new one that better suits your needs. That's a hard thing to do. Or you've spent ages building a beautiful, complicated solution to a problem and the problem's changed. It's like, no, look, this code, this is amazing. But it's not useful anymore. You don't want to lose that. So mitigation, encourage decision making based on future benefits rather than past investments. Collect data on progress if possible. If you can see objectively what's going on with something, you can make a better informed decision, which doesn't rely on your aversion to the loss of your effort, time and money. Get an unbiased opinion and listen to it. This is like for a relationship that you're struggling with, you talk to your friends about it and you get information and they give you a different perspective on what's happening. And that applies to code, to problems, all sorts of things. And recognise hard work, even if it's wasted. And that's the thing, if you spent so much time on this, it's been really, really hard, but it's no longer useful, you don't want to let it go, but sometimes you have to. Treat your endeavour like a struggling relationship and talk to somebody about it. Sometimes you just need to say, fuck it, and start again. Loss aversion. It's the tendency to prefer avoiding losses rather than acquiring equivalent gains. Losses are psychologically more impactful than gains. This is interesting. You flip a coin, you got a choice. You can flip a coin and you can win $110 on heads, but you'll lose $100 on tails. Do you do it? Most people will not want to lose $100, even though they could win a little bit more. And I think the correct answer for that is, how many times can I flip the coin? Another one is two choices. 50% chance to get $100, or you can get $45 right now. Which do you choose? Even though probability and everything tells you, first choice is the best one, we are averse to the loss. Program examples, reluctance to refactor. I don't want to change it, it might break things. Also don't want to lose the code that I had there. Not deleting code and comments. I might need this later. And often you won't. A reluctance to adopt new tools or processes. You know, I've learnt this stuff, I'm doing it this way, I don't want to, you know, it might make things harder for me for a while. We're adverse to that loss as well. Another one is reluctance to submit code. I don't want to break the build. You know, this is going to be a bad thing. If I break, everyone's going to suffer. So it's a real fear, particularly with more junior programmers. So mitigation, encourage psychological safety. Build a safe place where it's okay to risk and fail. You want to minimize the cost of breaking the build. So if you submit and it breaks things, it rolls it back instantly, tells you about it, and lets everyone else get on with their life, and you haven't slowed anybody else down. Celebrate brave failures. Things that have been awesome and they were the right thing to do at the right time, but they ultimately failed, should also be celebrated. And collaborate. Work with other people on things. Spreading that decision means it's not just you losing, it's everybody. It makes it easier to withstand. So make it okay to fail. If everyone agrees on the path and you take that path and it's wrong, it's not your fault. It's everyone's fault. You've spread the loss through the team. And I'd like to reiterate, psychological safety is important here. Knowing that your team trusts you and you trust your team means that you can make a mess. You've tried to do your best and they trust that you've tried to do your best, so it's okay. Framing effect. It's the way that information is presented influences decisions and judgments. So, some examples. This food product is 85% fat-free, but it's 15% fat. Which one sounds better? This drink additive is 99.9% safe, but if everyone in Australia drank it, 25,000 people would die. They're eating the dogs. No, they're not. Some program examples, like a solution built with a particular container flavor can frame. You've used an unordered map because you want to, and then you like them, and you like the syntax for them, and the next person that comes along sees that solution, thinks the map is, that the choice of the map is made for a reason, so they'll stick with it, even if it may not be the best container to use. So it's solution framing. In code, constantness on parameters is a valuable frame. It tells you what's going to happen with this throughout this function. All right? It's a good frame. Incorrect comments can frame. If you've got an old comment that no longer is valid for a function, it tells you it works in a certain way, and it doesn't. It kind of, there's a cognitive clash there when you're trying to read it and understand it. So be aware of the positive and negative effects of framing. Your words matter. Be positive with your comments. For example, rephrasing things like, you know, documentation could be a pain in the ass, but if you focus on the benefit it has for future you, it's actually less of a hassle, because you know that you're going to personally benefit from it. So framing things in the right way is valuable. The halo effect is tendency to let an overall impression of a person, company or product influence specific judgments about them, often leading to biased evaluations. So it's your 10x programmer that always does everything amazingly well and everyone's kind of a little bit scared of them and doesn't want to say that their code is wrong or could be better. So examples are real estate agents, always dressing professionally. Good students get marked better because they're good students, not necessarily because their work is better. There's a tendency, which is hard for you to step away from. And celebrity endorsements for products, which is why we have advertising. If a programmer came to an interview dressed like a real estate agent, would you employ them? You should, if they're good, but you'd think twice about it. So yeah, examples are senior devs' code reviews being less critically reviewed. You assume they're right. They probably are right, but you don't review them as critically because you think they're probably right. Some game engines are perceived as being better due to popularity. Popularity doesn't mean better. Popular devs with large social presences can be perceived as good at their field. even if what they're good at is having a social presence. Mitigation. I'm not sure I like this one, anonymous code reviews. If you didn't know whose code you were reviewing and they didn't know it was your comments, would that make things better? I don't know. I like to know the level of the programmer that I'm working with so that I can frame responses appropriately, but again, it's like a negative halo effect. So, but yeah, judge on merit, not popularity. Celebrity and renown can be used positively. If you've got a good programmer who people really like and respect, you can use them to recruit and to voice opinions about things that will benefit your company. Just being aware of this helps. So you should really be challenging yourself with respect to the halo. You know that you're in awe of somebody, look at their code harder, question them more, learn from them. I'm going to have to speed up. Recency bias is a tendency to give more weight to the most recent information or experiences when making decisions. For example, choosing the last thing mentioned by a waiter. Does anybody watch Beard Meets Food? Dude eats lots of stuff on YouTube. If you'll notice, when he orders the desserts at the end, he always chooses the last one. It's recency bias. Your holiday finishes with a storm. It ruined everything. That's what you remember, rather than all the cool stuff that happened before. Or an awesome movie with a shit ending. Program examples, the most recently reported bug is the most important one. I'm awful at this. Something gets reported, I want to fix that. There's a bit of code that I've seen, it's inefficient, I can fix it. But you end up doing lots of little things all over the place and not really solving the problems you should be. So mitigation is to maintain a backlog of tasks, up-to-date priorities, use clear criteria for calculating priority. A good one is any shiny new tasks you come across, add them to a personal backlog so you can come back to them later. You feel like you're doing something about it and you can just get on with the highest priority tasks immediately. So write down stuff you want to do, focus on the big picture, and use data to make your decisions. These biases aren't exclusive. They overlap and reinforce each other. I had difficulty finding these examples and identifying them as one bias or another. Now these reinforcements, they can show up in certain ways. And a good one that was mentioned in the book is what you see is all there is. Okay? You don't... It basically explains how people tend to make decisions and form judgments based only on the information that's immediately available to them without seeking out or considering missing data. So this, what you see is all there is all of these biases. It's the availability heuristic, you're just looking at what's available. Confirmation bias, you've got limited information, you're confident that you can make a decision based on that limited information. There's anchoring bias in there, there's overconfidence bias in there as well. And recency bias, the stuff that's happened, most recently. As an aside, these biases can be used for good. I think a good example is the acknowledgement of country. Having this mentioned repeatedly makes it more recent in our mind, and it's something we will consider when, if we didn't mention it ever, we wouldn't really think about it. So these biases can be used powerfully. People are bad at making consistent subjective decisions. Experts will contradict themselves 20% of the time when given the same data and situation under different contexts. That's 1 in 5. Current biases can heavily impact judgment due to context dependency. For example, the meal pattern. Bordeaux in France, they make wine, and the wine ages based on, and could be worth huge amounts of money. And predicting the value of wine far into the future is valuable because you can invest at the right time. There are people whose job it is to just guess which year is going to be the best, and they're pretty bad at it. It's like predicting the stock market as well. So this statistician put together a very simple equation using average temperature, the amount of rain at harvest, and the rain over the previous winter. And it has a 90% correlation. And it's far better than all of the experts using a very simple equation. If you have clear quantifiable outcomes, we have clear data and a valid environment, then build a formula to solve your problems rather than using humans. Now there's some cheats. System 1 can be trained, and it can be incredibly powerful. Chess players can look at a board and instantly see the threats, the patterns. There's some great examples of this. I was watching stuff on YouTube about it and showing a board and the person predicting which game it was and which year and what stage it was, just at a glance. Music, when you're playing music, when you're doing it right and you're proficient, you're not thinking about what you're doing. It just flows. Sports ball, you're not thinking about bouncing the ball and kicking it. It's instinctive. Cooking, it's not about getting exactly the right ingredients. It's the smell, it's the sound, it's the color, it's all these things together that your System 1 is using to identify, that this is ready. So if you have, in order to train System 1, you need a valid environment, which means repeatable, reliable outcomes, varied repetition. You need to be able to do it in similar situations, but the same problems. Timely feedback is a big one. For example, choosing a student for university or something, and you're not going to know for 4 years whether or not your choices were successful. How do you iterate on that if there's a 4-year gap between the result and your choices? So timely feedback is important to be able to train System 1, and deliberate practice, like they say, the 10,000 hours to be a master. Actually practicing this. So this can lead to quick, intuitive opinions on systems within your areas of expertise, almost superhuman abilities. And this is why complying to a coding standard is important in a code base as well, because consistent style, indenting, formatting, and language feature use means that you can very quickly grok the code and identify problems. But counterintuitively, because it's all kind of the same, you're not really engaging System 2, so you're not necessarily going to see the problems as well. If you had different coding styles, you would read a lot more carefully what was going on to understand what was there. But do you want speed? Do you want accuracy? Yeah, interesting problems. So in summary, awareness. Just being aware of these biases can help. Like, why do I think that? What am I basing that decision on? Recognizing these biases is the first step towards mitigating their impact. Data-driven decisions. Where possible, collect data to inform your choices, because we suck at subjective decision making. Use algorithms and formula to predict and confirm where possible. Relying on data and objective measures can reduce the influence of subjective biases. Diverse perspectives. Basically, diversity of culture and education and experience can mitigate many of these biases. A lot of these biases are very different based on your upbringing. So having lots of different people looking at the same problem in different ways can lead to the best solutions. Encouraging collaboration and seeking feedback from team members with different viewpoints can challenge these biases and lead to better solutions. And finally, psychological safety. Make it okay to fail and okay to critique and to be critiqued. Make your workplace a safe place. Make your workplace a place where you want to be, where you can learn and grow in a supportive environment. That whole loss aversion thing is a big issue, and making it okay so you don't feel bad is really important. So thank you for coming to my talk. I hope it's engaged your System 2 somewhat, and you can take something useful away from this. Thank you. Do we have any questions? We have a microphone I think we can use.
So I've got a question. So as a principal engineer, I'm working with junior developers quite regularly.
Yep.
And one of the biggest things I've found when thinking about these same types of problems is that it's really, a lot of it is experience-based. Do you have any particular recommendations that you find work well for helping bring junior developers into more of a mentality or a set like this, or particular things that would make them more valuable to the team quicker?
I think mentoring, obviously, is a good one. And even bringing them in with like code reviews and RCAs and getting them exposed to as much like the higher level engineering content as possible. Not expecting them to be able to reach that, but to be able to understand what it is they will end up learning. And I think building relationships with more senior engineers is incredibly valuable as well. Knowing that they can trust and ask stupid questions and not be judged on their stupid questions. There's the whole halo effect issue you need to kind of bypass. I don't know, I'm talking about this, but I don't have all the answers, and I'm using a lot of this now to try and better understand myself, my own biases, and how I can identify them with other people as well. So I almost answered your question, I think. I hope. Yeah.
Great talk. I really want to see one of your more technical talks at some point too. Quick and basic question. You mentioned comments can be a bias.
Yes.
From old comments. So how would you word a comment to be better in code so that it can less bias anyone who's reading it?
Comments, in my opinion, should be rare. The code is a comment. It should be clear and concise, and you should be able to read the code and understand what's going on. If an LLM can parse your code and bring out comments for it, so can you. A comment should be there to explain why something is being done this way. If there's other context that you need to show, then that's when you'll have a comment in there.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's...
Makes sense.
And yes, next one I'll make a nice technical. I had two options.
It was
for
great.
this.
It was really good.
I had two options for this this talk that I put forward, and my technical one was turned down. So I did this one.
It is what it is.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Because I had to. One of the things that I kind of find interesting is programmers, their personal identity is often on this whole idea of being logical and, very, very, I'm not emotional. This is a logical thing. And so I've sort of seen, I'm sure we've all seen at various times, where if you kind of critique or whatever, or suggest an error or see an issue, suddenly it's, oh my God, blah, and it's rage and it's all of this sort of stuff. What sort of techniques do you think might kind of help people like all of us? Because we all have this identity of, well, I'm a good programmer. So, what sort of things do you think we should do to kind of short circuit that automatic response?
Yeah, that's a very real problem. Being careful with text comments. Text can be misread, particularly from programmers that are just, here's the facts. And the facts can be brutal sometimes. And trying to step back and say, okay, I'm dealing with a human here. I'm going to be nice in the way I say that their code is shit. And it's providing, here's an example of what you should do in a comment. So, like with all of these, being aware of these biases and these contexts and subjective responses to things is half the battle. But yeah, and also I think it comes back to psychological safety here as well. When someone criticizes your code and you're like, no, this is right. Maybe it's not. If you can take the time to step back a little bit and distance yourself from your baby and talk to the person about why they think there's a better way of doing this is valuable. But it is a real problem. There are egos at play that can be very easily damaged because of, different opinions about the code. And sometimes it's not a clear, yes, this is right. Sometimes either solution is okay, and compromises need to be made. So I think it's educating your more senior engineers to lead by example and be a bit more compassionate in their reviews of code.
Thank you for your talk. It definitely engaged System 2. What advice do you have for the juniors in the room who sort of, that topic you said about having that safety to fail, where there is that worry of, if I fail, that's me accountable for issues broader than myself. What advice do you have for like starting that conversation or being mindful of that and sort of, I guess, talking to people above you and saying, you know, what strategies are there for me? You know, where can a more junior person sort of, I guess?
Yeah. I think that really it's up to the seniors to be able to build a safe place and be aware of, we were all juniors once. I think I was a junior once. and making it a safe place for them and being able to encourage and grow your talent, because the juniors are really valuable because they become seniors. And if you nurture them and look after them, then they could be good seniors. Unfortunately, there are toxic work environments for juniors, and if they don't change and support you, then it's time to start looking around elsewhere. But I don't know, as a junior, ask questions. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't be afraid to, I suppose it's the halo effect, you know. You don't want to be a pest, but you're spending all this time not doing what you need to be doing when, you know, a very simple, quick answer could put you on the right track straight away and save a heap of time down the track. So I think just be brave, ask questions, and try and build relationships with, you know, different levels of engineers, not just the juniors around you.
Thank you.
Hi. First, do I have time?
5 minutes.
Okay. So first, awesome talk. Secondly, I've read a book that is Code That Fits in Your Head. And in there it says like we have like to focus on something because brains can remember like 7 things at the same time. And you were also saying that it creates like a bias and we should see it in a big picture. So I would ask, how would you balance these things? Like what would be the first step? The big picture or?
You do need to build some context around the problems you're solving. I think it depends.
Okay, let's say like a refactor of a big gameplay system.
Yep.
Okay.
Why do you need to refactor it?
Because a bug happened and we can fix it and we need to add more in the future.
My brain can only hold 7 things, and I've lost the context of the question.
How would you balance like the focus on things and the big picture scenario?
Okay, so like fine-grained, small detail versus the big picture. Yeah. Well, that's part of the job as an engineer, is to break up these big problems into little ones that we can solve easily and quickly without breaking everything else. And it's a hierarchy. It's not just one brain that needs to do it. If it's a big refactor, it's hopefully involving a few people. So they all have their own subjective biases and context and understanding of how a thing should work, and it's a discussion to find the solution that is probably the best one. Not everyone's going to have the same ideas, and being able to bounce off of those and whittle it down to a plan that will probably change, because when you start, you see the system with a particular context, and that can change as you start to solve the problem. You realise things need to change along the way. So you need the big picture to understand where you need to go in, you know, a year's time, but you also need to be able to drill down and solve small, simple problems as you go to get there, and potentially changing where you're aiming to as that changes.
Okay.
So,
thank you.
Thank you. So, last question.
Thanks, and I'll try my best to keep it brief. Excuse me. So my question is in particular in regards to sort of the early steps, the baby steps towards trying to break some of these biases down. Is very often you can manage to catch when a sort of a bias is maybe starting to lead you in the wrong direction, and then maybe as a result of that you discover that you need to get more good data about the problem and what the problem demands in terms of a solution, and it leads from there. And very often after discovering that problem, then the biases come right back again, and you start going for the data that's easy to access and things of that nature, the things that are easy to collect and quantify, and as a result you end up steering yourself in just a different wrong direction, or just reinforcing the same direction as a result of that. So this might be a little bit more of a discussion for GCAP 2025, but good data collection and being able to recognize when the data that you've gotten is good versus good, but potentially not in the kind of way that you need it to be.
Yeah.
Do you have any recommendations?
That was the other talk that I wanted to do.
I've had a feeling.
Because data is objective, but the analysis can be subjective. You can very easily analyze data and get, depending on what you're looking for, pull out different answers. And being able to accurately identify incorrectly analyzed data. When I look at data, I pull it apart and I dig down and I look for patterns and try and find out things that don't look right, and then understand why they're not right and what was my assumption that made me think that shouldn't happen and why is it happening. And to me, it's like trying to prove myself wrong as much as I can until I can't do it anymore, and then I understand the data. Even if it's telling me that what I've done is wrong, and accepting that, okay, the data's not wrong in this case, so I'm not a data scientist, but it's a fascinating area, I think.
Absolutely. I look forward to next year.
All right, so I think we're at time. Thank you all very much for coming.